Hey everybody, this is Dan. Today I wanted to talk about the EMP threat, whether North Korea or Iran had the ability to launch a successful EMP attack in the United States. I posted part of this seminar up once before. It's experts in the field of electromagnetic pulses. And I wanted to remaster it because I put a lot of music in it that was really horrible. And it's a great informational tool. So let's see about the EMP threat for the United States from North Korea or Iran. And by the way, guys, I'm going to be doing a 2,000 sub giveaway. And I've hidden in 3 of the videos that I've put up in the last 4 days one part of a code. If you have all 3 parts of that code, which is numerical, and comment on any of my videos with it, you will be entered in the 2,000 sub giveaway.
Good afternoon. My name is Frank Gaffney. I'm the president of the Center for Security Policy. We are delighted to be sponsoring on short notice, but I think a very timely and topical presentation by several of the people who I think are most knowledgeable about and certainly most effective in communicating about the threat that is known as electromagnetic pulse, or E.M.P, and the various ways in which that pulse could afflict a nation like the United States, either man-caused or naturally occurring, and the repercussions of such an affliction. We're going to talk a bit about a very important and somewhat unexpected, but not unanticipated, development in the past few days that bears directly upon the man-caused piece of the problem, namely the interception in Panama of a vessel of North Korean operation that had in its hold some weaponry that might bear directly upon the threat of man-caused nuclear EMP. We'll be going through a sequence of presentations that will touch on that and the naturally occurring phenomenon. We'll also talk about how we can take steps, indeed how we believe we must take steps as quickly as possible to mitigate America's vulnerability, specifically the vulnerability of our electrical grid, upon which our entire society, of course, critically depends, to this phenomenon of electromagnetic pulse, however it is generated. I'm going to move through this batting order fairly quickly. It is a star-studded cast. We'll talk at the end a bit about what specifically is now in play on Capitol Hill as a remedy to this problem. We'll also talk about public opinion attitudes on the danger posed by EMP and the necessity of mitigating our vulnerability to it. And then finally, we'll announce the formation of a new coalition to try to help ensure that these corrective actions are taken, and taken as a matter of urgency, as we believe is appropriate. We're going to be hearing first from Dr. Peter Pry. Dr. Pry has a history of deep knowledge on matters involving nuclear and EMP-related threats. He served, among other things, as the executive director of the EMP Threat Commission, a blue ribbon, congressionally mandated study that over a number of years conclusively established the nature of the threat. He is currently the executive director of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security, and also a director of the United States Nuclear Strategy Forum, a man of considerable expertise, in part derived from his years in the intelligence community of the United States, as well as a professional staff member on Capitol Hill. I'm very pleased to have him here to address specifically this question of what the North Korean vessel had aboard it and what it might portend. With that, Peter Pry, over to you.
Thank you so much, Frank. One of the nightmare scenarios the Congressional E.M.P. Commission had was the possibility of a rogue state or terrorist group, and they specifically considered both Iran and North Korea when examining this threat, making an E.M.P. attack against the United States by launching a primitive missile off of a freighter near the U.S. coast. What is an electromagnetic pulse? An E.M.P., think of it as super lightning, except its effects, instead of being on an area, on a point, can be on an area. When you detonate a nuclear weapon at high altitude, at 30 kilometers or more, it generates a super energetic radio wave that will destroy electronics potentially across a continental-sized area if the altitude is high enough. But even at the relatively lower altitudes, it basically can cause massive destruction of the electric grid and all the critical infrastructures that depend upon that. The communications, transportation, food, and water, the things that sustain our modern civilization and life itself, would collapse in the aftermath of an E.M.P. nuclear attack. This can also be caused by the sun, by a solar flare that can generate something very similar to a nuclear E.M.P. Now, why are we here today? Because of our particular concerns about the North Korean freighter that was intercepted in Panama, the Chong-Chon-Gang. This North Korean flagged freighter with a North Korean crew, which resisted the boarding of it by the Panamanian authorities, and the captain attempted suicide rather than being boarded on preliminary examination, and the whole vessel hasn't been examined yet. They've only examined one cargo hold, 20%, and have already found 2 SA-2 missiles. These are admittedly old surface-to-air missiles, but they were designed to carry both conventional and nuclear warheads. They also are high-altitude missiles. They were used back in the 60s to take down Gary Francis Powers during the U-2 incident. They can reach an altitude of 20 to 35 kilometers, so they can reach the altitude for an E.M.P. attack. They've got a slant range of about 40 miles, which means you could take a missile like this, put it in a freighter, stand off the coast, outside of our international territorial waters, and put an E.M.P. attack over some place like New York City or Baltimore. The area of effect would reach 60 miles inland and probably collapse the Eastern electric grid, which generates 70% of the electric power of the United States, which would have catastrophic consequences. The Congressional E.M.P. Commission estimated that an attack like this, given our current state of unpreparedness, could kill up to 90% of the American population within a year from starvation, disease, and societal collapse. It's basically a high-tech means of killing people the old-fashioned way. Now, none of us are alleging that the purpose of the North Korean freighter was to do an E.M.P. attack, or even that they were practicing this. In fact, they probably weren't. But it's extremely disturbing to find that we didn't even know that a freighter of a rogue state like North Korea actually had nuclear-capable missiles in its hold, 2 of them, and there were other dismantled parts within that hold, and we didn't even know about it. The Panamanians didn't stop them because they had direct knowledge of these missiles. They stopped them because the Chong-Chon Gang had a history of carrying drugs and arms to criminal organizations, and they apparently thought that they were going to find drugs aboard. Instead, they found, in effect, what could be a delivery system for a weapon of mass destruction. So it should give us pause that we have this sort of activity going on in our backyard, the Caribbean. These visits by North Korea and by Iranian freighters to countries like Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba happen all the time, and we don't know what's going on. So it makes much more plausible the nightmare scenario that the E.M.P. Commission raised, which is this idea of a foreign flagged vessel, a freighter, rogue states or terrorists conducting a nuclear E.M.P. attack that would have catastrophic consequences for the United States. I mean, everything was there except the nuclear weapons on the missile. Another thing I want to point out is, I'm amazed at how little reported this incident has been in the press. In fact, I only learned about it myself this morning. But on April 16th, an armed gang attacked a farm of transformers in San Jose, California with AK-47s and tried to take them out. They damaged 5 of the transformers. This made the local press, didn't make much of the national news, didn't make any as far as I can tell. And initially, the local sheriff reported it as a sabotage attempt against these transformers. You know, subsequently, the reporting has toned it down that it was vandalism with AK-47s. None of the transformers were destroyed, but 5 of them were damaged, and this alone was sufficient to cause them to put people on to call for reduced electrical use in the San Jose area because of the damaged transformers. Now, if you put this together with what's been happening to our country, you know, massive cyber attacks against our computer systems. Now you've got an armed gang, you know, of some sort that made this attempt against these transformers, you know, a physical sabotage attempt, and now a freighter carrying nuclear-capable missiles off of our coasts. You know, in the one of the things the Commission found that's very important and that hasn't been widely understood by people, but people like R. James Woolsey in congressional testimony have been trying to educate policymakers to this fact, is that cyber warfare in the doctrines of countries like Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran is not just about computer viruses. Their doctrine includes physical attacks like sabotage attempts against transformers and critical parts, and all the way up to nuclear EMP attacks.